I would like to start our session today with um, this. I'll just show you the video and then we'll talk about it. So take a look. Take a look at this. First, I'll just say say thank you to UCLA Department of Physics and Astronomy for giving me permission to use this video. As you can see, the metronomes here were started by a person at different times. Now let's take a look at what happens. All right, you're starting to see what's going on here. Now see what happens. It's kind of satisfying to watch. Take a look. All right. So, yeah, perfect sync. Right. So as you can see, just to make sure you understood what happened here, in case you're not familiar with this example, this is a famous experiment. It was replicated many times. You can do it in your own living room with some metronomes, 2 cans of soda. They should be empty probably, and some platform that you can rest on those empty cans. And this is what happens. So as you can see, again, let's just kind of run through the video here. The metronomes were started at different times, and very quickly, within less than a minute, they start gradually synchronizing until they reach perfect sync. All right, so what is going on here? Why is this happening? How does this work? Well, the base, the platform that the metronomes are on, is moving. It's free to move because it's resting on these empty cans, right? So what happens is that the moving base apparently becomes some sort of a conduit for these metronomes to transfer energy, in this case, kinetic energy. And as they transfer energy through this moving platform, it won't work if the platform is not moving. These transfers of energy, of kinetic energy, influence the metronomes and make them change their frequency gradually until they all reach a state of equilibrium, like a resting state of balance. And in that state of balance, they keep working, they keep ticking and talking, but they do it synchronously. And this phenomenon is called spontaneous synchronization. That's how science refers to it. But this phenomenon of synchronization, spontaneous synchronization, doesn't just happen with metronomes. So take a look at this, for example. This is the Earth, our Earth, and this is the Moon. And wherever you are on Earth, whenever you are on Earth, if you look at the Moon, you're always seeing just one side of it. This is called the near side of the Moon. The far side of the Moon, like the back side, we never get to see it. And the reason for that is because over millions of years, the tidal forces of the Earth have slowed down the rotation of the Moon on its own axis until it locked into synchronous rotation. We call that the Moon is tidally locked to Earth. And what that means essentially is that, again, whenever you are and wherever you are on Earth, you'll always see this side of the Moon, this gray side, and the area here that's highlighted green, the far side of the Moon, is never visible to us from Earth because when the Moon orbits the Earth, it completes one circle around the Earth exactly as it completes one rotation around its own axis. And so it's constantly orbiting the Earth, and it is constantly rotating, and it's in perfect sync in a way that we only see the 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 bright side of the moon, so to speak. Um, this effect, it doesn't just happen with our moon. This is a common effect throughout galaxies. There's actually 30 something moons in our solar system that are tidally locked to their planet in a similar way. There's a nice example with Jupiter, for instance. There are the three closest moons to Jupiter. They all are locked synchronously to Jupiter in a ratio of 1 to 4. So when one moon, the farthest moon, completes one circle around Jupiter, the second closest moon completes 2 circles, and the closest moon completes 4 circles. And that synchronous movement and synchronous rotation is continuously taking place. Okay, so we went from these metronomes, right, which we can, like, these small objects here on Earth, to celestial objects in the cosmos. What about, but that's all inanimate stuff, right? Inanimate matter. What about biology? What about biological life? So this, as you probably noticed, is a firefly, and this is an individual firefly. But take a look at this article from Quanta magazine. They have an image here that shows a specific species of male fireflies in Japan that synchronize their flashes. So as you can see, this is quite astonishing to see, this sort of wave of flashes that thousands of fireflies are flashing or synchronously. And so we don't yet know exactly, science-wise, we don't know exactly how this works. We can quantify describe the math of it, the mathematics of it. We can observe the synchronous patterns, but we still don't know exactly how it works. What we do know with regards to the fireflies is that the males flash to, they glow to tell the females, come mate with me, right? And the female, that's also known, the female firefly needs a large light input to respond. And each firefly can tweak its internal timing of its glows to match its neighbors. But over time, what you get is these beautiful synchronous patterns of potentially thousands or even more of fireflies that are synchronously glowing. Some species actually even glow thousands at the same exact, like blinking together at the same exact time. You can look it up and find some cool videos of that. So we don't really know what's happening, but in a way, if you will, just like how the moon is tidally locked to planet Earth, so in a way, in a sense, you could say that in a similar way, the male fireflies sync together so that their flashes can produce enough light to attract the females, and in that sense, they are synchronously locked together to attract the female. So that's an interesting concept, just to see how this concept, this effect of spontaneous synchronization, runs through all of nature, through all scales of nature and levels of nature, biology included. Take a look at this. You've probably seen something like this at some point, right? These, again, thousands of fish, schools of fish that are synchronizing their movements. Take a look at this one. This is starlings. This is called the murmuration of starlings. Just gorgeous to look at it, right? Kind of hypnotizing. And the question you want to ask yourself is who's the choreographer? Who is conducting this whole thing? Who tells them where to go? How do they synchronize? How do these birds, not too clever as individuals of a creature, right? How do thousands of them do this? Where is the choreographer, right? So this is another instance of the same phenomenon of spontaneous synchronization on the biological level. And there's more. Let me show you, remind you what happens in your heart, for example. So in your heart, there are 10,000 or so pacemaker cells that beat together in synchrony. And it's a unique kind of sync. It's not that they all beat as one. There's actually these spiral shapes of electrical excitation that in which they beat, and that is what keeps you alive, keeps the blood flowing through your body in exactly the right pace and the right way. This is a very unique kind of synchronous pattern, because if they all would just sync as beat as one, that would mean heart problems. That would mean even death. If they don't sync at all, that also means you'd be dead. So they sync at exactly the right way to enable life. And then the neurons in our brain, they too, of course, fire in synchronous patterns. And here too much sync, that could mean the brain of someone who's having a seizure. No sync at all, and you would be able to move a finger. So this phenomenon just keeps going and going throughout all levels of nature. It pervades us and everything around us. Here's one last example. Our whole body, in fact, is regulated by what we call circadian rhythms. And these circadian rhythms are essentially another form of synchronization. Your brain essentially has an internal kind of clock that syncs up with the 24-hour cycle of night and day. That's why, for example, you get jet lagged when you move between time zone. You fly to a different country with a different time zone, you come back, and then you experience what we call jet lag. And it's essentially your internal clock gradually adjusting itself to the new conditions of night and day. And what you experience as jet lag is that period of time until your internal clock gets back in sync with the environment around you. And that, of course, has to do with how your body regulates hormones and melatonin in your brain and all of that stuff. Your whole body is regulated according to these circadian rhythms, which is another form of synchronization, spontaneous synchronization. All right, let's take a look at a definition. There's a few of them that you can find for this phenomenon. This one is from some recent study. And it puts it like this: spontaneous synchronization is a remarkable collective effect observed in nature, whereby a population of oscillating units, as we saw, could be the metronomes that oscillate at a certain frequency. They could be the fireflies that flash. That's another form of oscillation. They could be the moon that is rotating on its axis. So it doesn't matter really what kind of oscillation and what kind of element in nature. And they have, so a population of oscillating units have different natural frequencies, just like the metronomes, and they are in weak interaction with one another. Weak interaction here just means that It's not a kind of interaction that throws the whole structure of the system. So if you think about like a seesaw or a swing, actually, that would be more right. Like a swing that you when you put your kid on a swing in a playground, right? So the swing oscillates, and you could say that if you push the swing, you're in weak interaction with it. Let's say if you push it really hard, then you might even break it, or it will start making weird movements. So in that sense, it will break the oscillation. But as long as the units are oscillating and they are in weak interaction with one another, the system evolves, the population of oscillating units evolves to spontaneously exhibit collective oscillations at a common frequency. Again, think metronomes or fireflies or all of the other examples. So, this is quite remarkable, isn't it? It's kind of fascinating. Here is what Professor Steven Strogatz says about that. Steven Strogatz is an award-winning professor of applied mathematics at Cornell University, and he's pretty much the guy you go to about spontaneous synchronization. He wrote a famous book about it, and then he studies this phenomenon from the perspective of a mathematician. And check out what he says here. One of the things that I find most appealing about it, about spontaneous synchronization, is how universal it is, that it occurs at every scale of nature, from subatomic to cosmic. It uses every communication channel that nature has ever devised, from gravitational interactions to electrical interactions, chemical, mechanical, you name it. Any way that two things can influence each other, nature uses that to get things in sync. So we're talking about some phenomenon that pervades all of nature, that appears on all levels, that manifests in all kinds of connections. I'll take the liberty of calling it the law of synchronization, just for this kind of clarity in this session. So the question that I would like to bring up together with you is, what about us? If all of nature is driven towards synchrony by this phenomenon of synchronization, this law of synchronization that, as we saw, pervades all of nature from the subatomic level to the cosmic scale, through the still, the vegetative, the animate levels of nature. What is going on with us then? What's our relationship with this law? Does it work just on our bodies? Because we know that it does work on our bodies. For instance, you could see this phenomenon when there's an audience who is watching a theater show or something like that, and they clap, and sometimes they begin to clap in sync, all beating together as one, like a pulse. Who decided that? Who said, okay, let's now start clapping in sync, in unison? So that's a phenomenon of spontaneous synchronization in humans, for example. But does it only work on our bodies, or does it have some kind of effect on our inner worlds as well, more specifically on our thoughts and desires? Or you could ask it like this: what kind of conditions are required for this law of synchrony, for this effect of synchronization to occur between us? Let me know what you think. Let me know what your gut feeling is about this in the chat here. Tell me what you're thinking. So, okay. While you're doing that, I'll continue and elaborate on this question, take it to another perspective. Is it possible that nature, just like it activates this law of synchronization across all of the still, vegetative, and animate levels? Is it possible that nature is driving all of humanity, all of us, as a global species towards some kind of greater global synchrony? Is it possible that this process is happening as we speak? Why don't we see it? Or do we? This would mean, if this is what's happening, this would mean that all of our human history, whether it's our conflicts, our collaboration, our creation of culture, science, education, communication, all of that, from this perspective, if it's all driven by a law of synchrony, that would mean that we are constantly bumping against each other in many different ways through many different connections between us until we gradually come into some form of sync. And everything that we experience as human development, everything that has happened in human history, is the process of us bumping against each other until we begin to oscillate on some common frequency. So if that's the case, will we just continue and bump against each other until we find some sort of global balance, some sort of global synchrony? Or do we have to be involved in the process? It's interesting because science calls this phenomenon spontaneous synchronization, right? Spontaneous implies that it just happens. It's, fireflies flash together, they reach a certain density of that flock, of that group, and when a certain density is reached, they start flashing together synchronously. So is that what's happening with us as well? Will it just happen spontaneously, or that because we are highly conscious beings, our consciousness is somehow involved in the process of synchrony? So what do you think? What do you think? Okay, I see one suggestion here from Julie. Julie says, I say we all stand on a platform that's placed on a couple cans and see what happens. Okay, that's an interesting proposition. All right, that's a nice one. Well, let's see what the Kabbalists say about this. So Kabbalists say it's both. What does it mean? Meaning, yes, nature is pushing us towards global synchrony, all of us, just like we see this phenomenon of synchronization happening in other species, in inanimate stuff. It's happening in humanity as a whole as well, Kabbalists say. And yes, we can also move towards synchrony of our own accord. So think about what that means. On the one hand, nature is, this is what Kabbalists are telling us, right? That nature, on the one hand, is pushing us towards this state of synchronization, some form of synchrony. As we saw, synchrony has very different patterns, right? The metronomes seem like they're all doing just the same thing. The fireflies, also kind of the same thing, but the cells in our heart are beating at a different time. The neurons in our brain, and this goes on and on. This it's in our intestinal system. It's in the cells in the pancreas. It's all over, everywhere. There is a form of synchronization that doesn't mean necessarily similarity. It doesn't mean that all the units are the same. It means that they're doing something together synchronously. And so Kabbalists say, yes, nature is pushing us towards some form of global synchrony that we still have to discover. But they also say, because we are highly conscious beings, we have a unique ability to move towards that synchrony of our own accord. Now, if you let that sink in for a second, one of the questions that should come up is, wait a second, if that's right, doesn't that mean that we are speeding up time? Because if nature is moving, like we saw, go back to the metronomes, right? It took them about 45 seconds to get into sync. So there is an element of time here, at least in how it appears to us in our perception. We see that over time they synchronize. Whether it's millions of years until the moon synchronizes its rotation and becoming locked with the earth, or it's a few seconds until metronomes get into sync, or it's minutes until fireflies, or hours until fireflies flash together. There is an element of the phenomenon of synchronization happening on the axis of time. If we can get consciously involved with the process, if we can move towards synchrony, that means that we are essentially speeding up time, isn't it? So take a look at what Kabbalist Yehuda Ashlag, also known as Baal Sulam, the greatest Kabbalist of the previous century. Let's see what he says. The law of development, which is spread over the whole of reality, acts through the power of government from above, which means without asking permission from the people, dwellers of earth. However, the law of development placed mind and authority in man's hands and permitted man to accept the law of development under his own authority and government. And he handed him the ability to hasten the process of development as he wishes, freely and completely independent of the boundaries of time. Take a second to let that sink in. So, like we said before, it's both. Meaning, yes, nature is pushing us towards global synchrony, and yes, we can move towards synchrony of our own accord, and that it does in fact mean that nature is giving us the ability through our consciousness, through our unique conscious ability, we can move towards synchrony, which is nature's predetermined state of balance. We can move towards it without being pushed by the process. If we don't move towards it, we will be pushed towards synchrony. One way or another, it will happen, but we were given the ability by the law of development to embrace this law and take it under our own authority and consciously move towards it, thereby essentially breaking free from the chains of time. That is quite astonishing to think about. That means that we can change our whole perception of reality. The way in which we experience nature right now, the way in which we experience this law of synchronization, we can change our attitude to it, change our consciousness of it, and thereby experience the same law of development, the same laws of nature, experience them in a new way, which raises us above our existing limitations that we identify as time, space, motion. So how do we do it, right? That is the question. By the way, if you're sending questions in the chat, we'll get there in a few minutes. So don't worry. Just definitely throw your questions into the chat, and very soon we'll get to that as well. So how do we do it then? What is it that Kabbalists propose that we do in order to actually move towards synchrony? So what Kabbalists found is that we can detect and experience the network that connects us in a way that if you put a group of people together and they're willing and able to make conscious efforts through those conscious efforts to move towards synchrony, they can make the conditions for that network, for that law or the phenomenon of synchronization to appear between them. What is it that they need to do? They need to begin to see themselves as a single system that, and again, we're talking about a small group of people. If they begin to work consciously on seeing themselves as a single system, this is something that in Kabbalah we call partzuf, and they are making emotional efforts to radiate concern and care towards each other. By that, they essentially make efforts in their thought and desire. Kabbalists call this mind and heart. When they do that, they don't immediately become one. What happens is that each one begins to experience oscillations towards that state of connection in that group of people, that state of synchrony. Let me just give you a little bit of let me just draw something here, maybe to make things a little clearer. So what happens is that if this is me as an individual, and I begin to work with this group of people, and we're working on seeing each other as a single system and radiating concern towards each other, and we do it consciously, even though it's not instinctive to us. It doesn't come to us spontaneously. That's the whole concept that Baal Sulam told us before, right? Nature is pushing us towards synchrony, but until we feel it, it doesn't come to us instinctively. And we instead decide in our group of people, we decide to, let me draw that as well, actually. We decide to begin to, let's say this is the group of people, and we begin to try to see each other as connected and feel each other as a single network. When that happens, each one of us, this is me, each one of us begins to go through what we call in Kabbalah ascents and descents, ups and downs. We begin to experience on our flesh, so to speak, in our, it happens internally. It's not the feeling in our body, it's in our mind and heart. We begin to feel that we are closer to that unity of the entire network, of the entire group, and then farther. We begin to feel that we move towards synchrony and away from synchrony, and each time we advance, each time we go up and down. So we begin to feel how we oscillate. And that's how we gradually begin to experience our direct conscious relationship with this law of synchronization on the human level. Each one discovers their unique contribution. As we said, synchronization is not similarity, it's harmony. It means that differences complete each other and become something new, one whole thing that's greater than the sum of its parts. And so, because everyone is different and everyone has a different form of inner structure, different kinds of desires and intentions and emotions, we each contribute the same kind of effort to be as one, to become connected, to radiate concern towards the network, towards each other. We do the same kind of effort. This is called in Kabbalah an intention to bestow. But each one discovers it in a unique way because each one has a unique contribution to give to the whole system. And so that is what I would call conscious synchronization. And that's the whole difference between us humans and the rest of nature. All of nature experiences this, this phenomenon of synchronization in a spontaneous way. And we have the ability to experience it in a conscious way and move towards that law of synchronization together of our own accord. All right, let's see what's up with some questions, and we'll go from there. All right. Okay, so I see one from Debbie. Are we unconsciously resisting becoming in sync with each other and the world? Yes, that is actually quite accurate, Debbie. This is unique because why are we resisting? Why can we say that we are resisting this law of synchrony? Because we are the only creature that can experience this law of synchrony consciously, of our own accord. That means that to begin with, we were created as our consciousness was formed to be outside of this law of synchrony. That is the only reason why we can then re-enter this law of synchrony, why we can become conscious of it, because we are instinctively opposite to it. We are resisting it. And so the only way for us to build our consciousness of this law of synchrony is to start from a state where we're opposite to it. So yes, instinctively, we are resisting this law. And if we learn how to embrace it and practice it between us, we will begin to feel that it works between us, that it's connecting us. And as I said, the whole Kabbalistic method is how to do it in a group of people. But from doing that, even in a small group, you get to see the pattern or the law of synchronization that exists throughout the whole human network. So while we do it in a laboratory with a small group, we're identifying the law that pervades all of humanity and all of reality. Okay, here's one from Yvonne. Does this oscillation eventually stop on and then positive side, or is that a lifetime thing? Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So like like the example of the metronomes or the oscillations, those spiritual oscillations, those ups and downs, as we call them in Kabbalah, ascents and descents. Do they ever stop? Well, Kabbalists describe the process that humanity goes through until we reach a certain state that they refer to as the final correction. The final correction refers to that state of ultimate synchrony, when both the still, the vegetative, the animate, and the human level of nature all go into a perfect synchrony. Until then, we have to always oscillate until we reach that ultimate synchrony. What happens after that is essentially what happens after what Kabbalists call the final correction. We don't know. And Kabbalists themselves say we don't know. There are a few hints here and there, very few in some Kabbalistic writings about what happens after the complete correction of the whole of creation, but it comes from very unique great Kabbalists who even then describe it from their own personal experience, and no one can describe it until it happens because it's a collective experience. Meaning that final correction, yes, a Kabbalist can attain that state individually, but on a collective level, we will know what it is when we all collectively achieve it. So I don't know what to tell you about what happens there, if that's what you're asking. Need to know, hey, what's up? Need to know is asking, I must admit I feel in total sync and always have with Kabbalah thinkers. I've tried to sway with other thinking and find it detriments me on, harms me on multiple levels. Okay, look, I'll say something about this, but I think this is more kind of relevant to people who are occupied in this wisdom for a while. So I don't know if it's that relevant to everyone, but I'll say something like this. It is true that when you start to practice the wisdom of Kabbalah and you feel this similarity, this like-minded quality with other people who practice it with you, of course, that is a unique connection. It's a unique connection between a unique point of consciousness that we refer to in Kabbalah as the point in the heart. It's actually the quality of bestowal that comes from the Creator himself, from that law of synchronization. It awakens in us, essentially, our point in the heart, our desire for spirituality, the desire that leads us to this wisdom of Kabbalah, to actually practice it, is an initial embryonic consciousness of the synchrony that exists throughout nature. And so when we come in contact with other people who have that point, we feel a unique kind of resonance, a unique kind of synchrony. That's exactly what we feel. But ultimately, our goal in our spiritual development, our goal in relation to synchronization, is to synchronize with all of mankind, with all of humanity, and with all of nature. So it's definitely natural to feel it closer and more tangibly and vividly and in a profound way with respect to other people who are conscious of it and practice it together with you. But ultimately, your goal, all of you, is to come to the greater global synchrony with all of mankind as well. All right. I see. I'm just looking for, there's a bunch of questions. I'm looking for some from less familiar names that I don't think I've answered before. Sue Galloway is asking, so if we live with a partner, does this have an effect on both people's heartbeats? And what if one person has heart problems? Okay, now you're already asking me about specific physiological phenomena and even medical effects. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the medical applications of synchronization. What I do know from a bit of research is that yes, there is such a phenomenon that can be observed where people's heartbeats get in sync when they share a certain connection. There's also a very interesting phenomenon when people are listening to a story told by one narrator, let's say. All of the listeners in the room, their brain patterns sync up as well. So yes, there is such a phenomenon. What does it mean medically? Not my area. So here's another one from Southern Sass. I was told that if I have a problem with someone's actions, that the problem was how I'm viewing them. Okay, so that is another whole branch or aspect that is studied in the wisdom of Kabbalah deeply, perception of reality. And yes, it's true that the system we exist in is designed in such a way that everything you go through, all of your experiences, they are perfectly designed to get you in sync with the rest of the system. So think about those metronomes again, just so we can stay in the context of synchronization, which is today's topic. If you think about the metronomes, before they synchronize, when they're in the process, what happens is that they transfer energy to between each other, and it changes their frequency more and more and more and more and more until each of them stays at the same frequency, all of them, right? So in a similar way, everything that's happening to us in life is designed to get us in sync with the whole system. That means that with respect to the observer, with respect to the I, with respect to the self, me who is going through my process of development, the whole system with respect to me is working perfectly. It's getting me in sync. It's giving me, transferring some energy to me, to use the metronomes example, in order for me to gradually change my internal oscillation so that I can get in sync with the rest of the system. So from that perspective, yes, everything that I see on the outside helps my correction, helps my process of synchronization. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't respond if someone is trying to hurt me or something like that. I just gave you one aspect of the equation, the correct perception of reality. We can't cover all of the aspects of this here, but just to give you an idea. Here's another one. Here's another one from Brandon West. Hey, Brandon, will everybody's point in the heart awaken, or do some people not have it, or will just go with the flow when the others awaken? Ooh, terrific question. Very relevant. Everyone has a point in the heart. If you're a human being, doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what is your language, your mentality, your background, your age, your cultural baggage, your political view, it doesn't matter. If you're a human being, you have a point in the heart. That's also why the wisdom of Kabbalah is truly universal, and it transcends religion and nationality and gender and everything else, because it only talks about the spiritual aspect of human desire, and that is that point in the heart. So yes, it exists in every person, but it exists in a dormant, latent fashion. It's asleep. It's like a gene that is there as potential, but it needs to be triggered. It's like a potential that hasn't been actualized yet. In you, it has been turned on. That's why it is most relevant and practical for you to find yourself working with an environment of other people who have their point in the heart turned on already. With respect to the rest of the people, the rest of humanity, you can make efforts with your desire, first of all, your conscious thought and intention. You can wish that they will wake up. You want to wake them up. And externally, maybe you will learn how to give them this ability through sharing information with them, but in a way that doesn't cancel their free choice. So that is something that needs to be taught. I hope that answered your question. I already lost it here in this stream of questions. Maybe there was another part to it. Sorry if there was. Josie Peters is asking, so what happens when we get out of sync? Sometimes so hard to get back in step. Okay, so in the process of spiritual development, what we described here, there is actually no such thing, Josie. You see, because every time you go up, or every time you go, let me just highlight it. So every time you go up, you're also going down, and then you go up again, and then you go down again. And this is part of the process. So getting out of sync is actually your preparation to get back into sync. And here is something I didn't describe in this graph. Let me redraw it here to emphasize something. We start from small oscillations and then we go higher. That is what spiritual development is all about. We go farther out of sync and then back to a greater level of synchronization. And essentially, the amplitude and the volume of these ups and downs, that determines the volume of our spiritual vessel. That becomes the vessel in which we can experience this spiritual synchronization. It doesn't happen with our bodies. We don't get in sync with our bodies. It's a growing consciousness. Kabbalists call it a vessel, the spiritual vessel. It's a non-material sensor. And it grows from plus and minus. So at first, it's just a point in the heart, and then we can begin to consciously oscillate with other points in the heart, looking for our connection, looking for our synchrony, making an effort to develop an intention to bestow to the other people in our network. And then we begin to oscillate between being able to do it and being unable to do it, reminding ourselves about this connection between us and forgetting about it, feeling it and losing touch with it. And through these oscillations, we begin to grow from our point in the heart. We grow a vessel, like a container that is capable of experiencing the spiritual reality, which has to be felt through greater, increasing levels of lack of sync and sync. Out of synchronization and into synchronization. That is the spiritual inhale and exhale of the soul, if you will. It is the rhythm, the circadian rhythm of your soul, let's say. Okay, let's see if we have, I think we can take one or two more questions, and then maybe one last question. Yeah. And then we'll go to our exclusive KabU session for the KabU students. So I'll say a word about that in 1 second. Let's go to another question. So Cannibal Osmos. Hey, Cannibal. You're asking from France. Cannibal Osmos from France is asking, is there such a thing as unconscious synchronization? Yeah, absolutely. Unconscious synchronization is the process or the state of being that all the rest of nature is already in. That's why metronomes don't need consciousness in order to sync up when they share the same network, when they're on a moving platform. That enables them immediately to sync up. Fireflies don't need a developed brain and a conscious activity in order to do it. You don't even need to be alive, as we saw. It's inanimate objects are doing that. You can even be just one cell. One cell is also gets in sync with other cells, as we saw in the example of the heart, the beating of the heart or the neurons in our brain. If you think about it, our whole body is like a meta synchronization that is happening. You have trillions of cells. I think about 10 trillion comprise your most important 70 or 80 organs or so. And all those important organs are also syncing up between them. And your whole body is a community of organs, and the organs are networks of cells, and each cell is a network of organelles. And as you can see, it's all networks and networks, layers of networks that work in synchronization to keep you alive. So all of nature spontaneously synchronizes, as science tells us. What we don't know is how our consciousness gets involved in the process. And this is what the wisdom of Kabbalah is all about. This is what Kabbalists have found through their direct experience, not in any kind of a belief or a religious way of thinking. They're practically coming together as a group and beginning to work with their mind and heart towards each other to find synchrony. That's what Kabbalists do, and that is where they derived all of their wisdom. Everything they know about nature, everything they understand about the nature of reality comes from experiencing this phenomenon of synchronization in a group of people. That's the whole wisdom of Kabbalah. It's very practical, it's empirical, it's based on direct observation and experience, and we're all invited to do the same. So, I'll take this opportunity to tell you how you can do that. If you're interested, if you want to actually practice the wisdom of Kabbalah in the best possible environment for that, that is why we have KabU. Let me say words here. I have a slide here that will help me. You can taste it for yourself. You can start practicing Kabbalah in a very practical way with a group of people who are just like you, with that unique desire and all the guidance that you need in KabU. As a KabU member, you'll then get access to all kinds of courses that cover all of the important topics in the wisdom of Kabbalah and the science of connection. There's also a structured learning path that will take you from A to Z. It's a process of actually 4 courses that you take gradually, one by one, and that really takes you deep into the foundations of Kabbalah. There's also weekly live events, just like the event we're going to have in just 1 minute with the KabU students. If you're not a KabU student, yeah, right, that's why I brought it up to begin with. If you're not a KabU student and you want to continue to the session that we're going to have right now with the KabU students, we're going to do some Q&A about this topic and more. You can go to KabU. There's a link in the description or in the chat. You can register now, and immediately I believe you'll get a link to the Zoom session that we're going to have right now. In KabU, there's weekly live events. There's also student forums, so that any kind of question you have, we have any questions answered policy. So you'll get an answer typically within 24 hours. There's also materials on the go, which means that if you're commuting or if you're traveling or if you always have the opportunity to download a transcript if you're on a train and you want to read the lesson instead of watching it on video, or if you want to hear your lessons with your iPod or your MP3 player or whatever, then we also made sure that that is always possible. So you're definitely invited to try out a KabU membership, and a KabU membership costs $19 per month, so you can give it a shot. And there's a 14-day free trial, so you can just get in and look into it, check it out, see if it works for you. Everything we do in KabU, we are a nonprofit organization, and everything we do in KabU is only for the goal of spreading and sharing the wisdom of Kabbalah with the world. So everything we sell here is at cost. If you went to other organizations that sell VOD courses and weekly live events and all of that stuff that I mentioned, you'd probably end up paying hundreds of dollars and more. But that's not our goal. Our goal is just to sustain and grow our ability to disseminate the wisdom of Kabbalah, share it with the world. So that's why the price is low. And as I said before, there's a 14-day free day free trial that you can test out, so you can look into it for yourself. All right, so that's with regards to KabU. Let me conclude our session with one quote that comes from my teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Lightman. I'll leave you with that, and then we'll go to the Zoom session with the KabU students. So Kabbalah helps us reveal the system that connects us as one, and to reveal it of our own accord. Essentially, this is what it means to reveal the Creator, the common force that governs all elements of creation. And we have to discover the synchronization between them, the force that connects them to reveal their common singular action, the driving force of nature. So that's the goal of Kabbalah. Hopefully in today's session you got a good taste of how Kabbalah is revealing to us the driving force of nature, what exactly it means, and also an overview of the Kabbalistic practice which happens between us, between people who feel this inkling, this unique desire towards a greater level of synchrony, a higher level of life, a higher level of happiness, meaning, purpose that comes from connecting to that deeper binding force of nature that we call the Creator. So thank you everyone for being with me here. Great questions. Thank you for them. I'll see the KabU students in just a bit in our exclusive Zoom session. All the best to everyone. Until next time.